My Alpha Brother's Omega assistant had always wanted to be Luna. She didn't know my identity, and she mistook me as a rival trying to steal her place. She framed me for theft and tortured me without mercy. As I lay dying, my dog Rex, the Siberian war dog, who had fought beside my brother and earned the highest military honors, who sacrificed his life to protect me. Today was supposed to be the day my brother returned from the battlefield to meet with the Alpha King and the Council Elders. But all I could think about was my childhood companion Rex, a Siberian war dog who had been our most loyal friend when my brother and I were children. 2 years ago, war broke out with the rogue wolves. My brother answered the Alpha Council's call and joined the army. Rex couldn't bear to be separated from him, so he secretly stowed away in the supply wagons and followed my brother to that brutal battlefield. I was heartbroken to see them leave. But the pack's interests always came first. I could only weep as I said goodbye, worrying about my brother, but even more about our beloved Rex. Rex wasn't just a dog to me. He was my best friend, my childhood companion. He would comfort me when I was sad, and always put himself between me and danger. In my heart, Rex wasn't just a dog. He was family. The war dragged on for years. Every day, I lived in fear for both my brother and Rex. By the moon goddess's grace, they both returned home alive and victorious. My brother often told me how extraordinary Rex had been on the battlefield. He had warned of danger countless times, searched for survivors among piles of corpses, and even secured decisive victories in crucial battles. The Alpha Council awarded him the highest honor, first-class war dog. The Alpha King himself said that without Rex's timely warnings, he would have been surrounded by enemies and killed. But glory came at a price. Rex's body was broken by the war, leaving him with injuries that would never fully heal. When my brother brought Rex back to the pack, my brother had also successfully inherited the Alpha position due to his battlefield achievements. I had only heard my brother describe Rex's heroic deeds. I didn't know the details, but every year wolves from the Alpha Council came to visit Rex. Even the Alpha King came in person. My brother said most of them were wolves Rex had saved on the battlefield. They would bring expensive supplements to aid Rex's recovery. I didn't know the specifics, but seeing how respected Rex was throughout the Alpha Council filled me with pride. When Rex so much as caught a cold, the Alpha King would send the best healers to treat him. These were all battle wounds, and he commanded the respect of the entire werewolf world. Today, I had returned to the pack. Those distinguished elders from thousands of miles away had flown here on private jets once again, just to visit Rex. The banquet wouldn't start for another 3 hours. Rex was aging now, and I was eager to see him. Let my brother handle those important visitors. After all, I hadn't seen Rex in years, and I had no idea how he was faring. I missed him terribly. Rex was old now, no longer the spirited dog of his youth. He lay weakly on an expensive carpet. When he saw me, like a gentle elder, he extended his tongue and tenderly licked my palm. I crouched down, pressing my cheek against his forehead and stroking his coat, which was no longer as smooth as it once was. Just then, the door burst open. My brother's assistant, that Omega named Celeste, stormed in with 2 scarred Delta bodyguards. Her face showed undisguised jealousy and malice. Before I could ask what was happening, Celeste struck me hard across the face, sending me crashing to the floor. The sharp pain made my head spin and my nose bleed. Celeste crossed her arms and sneered down at me coldly. So, I heard the Alpha got himself a new assistant. That's you, isn't it? How dare you try to compete with me? How dare you compete for his attention? The position of the Alpha's assistant belongs to me alone. I'll beat you to death today. The deltas she had brought looked equally vicious. She grabbed my hair and slapped me again and again. Let me tell you something. I've worked so hard helping the Alpha all these years. The Alpha values me above all others sooner or later. He'll choose me as his mate. I'm warning you. I'm going to be the future Luna of this pack. You're nothing compared to me. Get out of here. My mind went blank. Tried to explain, but as soon as I opened my mouth, a bottle of pungent burning liquid was forced down my throat. Wolfsbane. It instantly seared my throat and internal organs. I curled up in agony, feeling like my insides were being dissolved. Cough, cough. I didn't. I struggled to speak in my defense, but was interrupted by violent coughing and the taste of blood. Still lying, Celeste noticed an expensive crystal necklace around my neck. You even dare to steal the Alpha's belongings? Her expression turned murderous as she yanked the necklace from my neck. I writhed in pain, explaining weakly, I didn't steal it. That's my Celeste held up the necklace, looking down at me with contempt. Shut up, she sneered coldly and said viciously. This necklace has been in the Alpha's display case for years. He said it belonged to the wolf he treasures most. Isn't that something he prepared for his future mate? It belongs to me, and you dare steal it and wear it? Don't delude yourself. I will be his mate. This necklace was meant for me. If you didn't steal it, why are you wearing it? The evidence is right here in front of everyone. Still trying to deny it. I wanted to explain, but the poison burned through my organs like acid. I spat up blood mixed with fragments of my insides. A scream of pure agony ripped from my throat. I've seen plenty of wolves like you, Celeste sneered. There were several others who tried to steal my position before. I took care of all of them. You had the audacity to steal something the moment you arrived. Even if I beat you to death, the Alpha won't blame me. Right before my eyes, Celeste stuffed the necklace into her purse. She had originally been an Omega from the outer settlements beyond the Pax's core territory. Normally, someone like her could never even set foot in our inner circle. My brother had been hunting in the outer regions once when she happened to help him with some minor task. Seeing how pitiful and alone she was, he made an exception and promoted her to his assistant. Over the years, this sudden rise in status corrupted Celeste completely. At first, she had been careful and cautious in the core territory, terrified of being sent back to her precarious life on the outskirts. But then she realized that pack members treated her with respect only out of deference to my brother. Gradually, she became someone else entirely greedy and vicious. Whatever she set her sights on, she would obtain through any means. If anyone crossed her even slightly, she would order the Deltas to beat them. Not only that, she began using pack resources for her own benefit. She secretly diverted money meant for relief funds to help struggling pack members, using it to buy expensive clothes and luxury jewelry for herself. She thought she was being clever, that my brother would never discover her schemes. But nothing escaped my brother's attention. After all, he was the Alpha of this pack. When my brother confronted her with evidence of her crimes and moved to punish her, Celeste threw herself at his feet, sobbing and begging for forgiveness. It was I who pleaded for her over the phone again and again. I told my brother she was still young, that power had simply gone to her head, that she had been unable to resist temptation. But as long as her heart remained good, she deserved a chance at redemption. I never imagined that the person I had shown such mercy would prove so ruthless. As I lay there being beaten and kicked by Celeste and her Deltas, struggling and moaning in a pool of my own blood, the wolfsbane had made both my wolf and me too weak to fight back. Finally, Rex realized what was happening. Despite his frail condition, he rushed to place himself in front of me. Rex bared his teeth and snarled at Celeste. In that moment, I saw the same fearless courage in Rex's eyes that had made him legendary on the battlefield all those years ago. Celeste stepped back, momentarily intimidated by Rex's presence. Then, embarrassed by her reaction, she stepped forward again. Where did this mangy mutt come from? She spat. How dare you bare your teeth at me? Celeste kicked Rex viciously in the ribs. Rex went flying, slamming hard into the wall. but he struggled to his feet again, trembling as he positioned himself between me and my attackers. One of the deltas, seeing that Rex wouldn't back down, reached into the fireplace and pulled out a red-hot poker. He brought it down hard across Rex's body. A howl of agony filled the room. Rex collapsed on top of me, tears streaming down my face. I pulled Rex into my arms and turned my back to shield him from further harm. As the Delta continued his assault, my entire back was torn to ribbons. Blood poured from my mouth, staining Rex's fur crimson. The stench of burning flesh and blood filled the air. Rex whimpered, struggling desperately. He leaped from my arms and clamped his jaws around the Delta's wrist. The Delta screamed in pain and dropped the poker. "Filthy beast, die." Celeste seized the fish tank from the table and brought it crashing down on Rex's head. Rex crumpled to the ground, his breathing shallow and labored. "Rex!" I screamed in anguish, crawling toward him on my hands and knees, pulling his still warm body against my chest. His eyes remained open, as if reluctant to leave, as if taking one final look at me. No matter how I called to him, no matter how I shook him, he didn't respond. My dearest childhood companion, my brother's battlefield comrade, our pack's hero, he had died trying to save me, murdered by these vicious creatures. My tears mixed with the blood on my face, dripping onto Rex's lifeless fur. Celeste still wasn't satisfied. She walked over and deliberately stepped on Rex's corpse with her blood-stained shoe, sneering coldly. Stupid mutt should have known better. Just then, my phone on the floor began ringing. The banquet must be starting soon. My brother was calling to have me bring Rex to meet the Alpha Council elders. Seeing the contact name on my phone, Celeste snorted, "Ha, brother, how sweet, you little... You really think you're something special, don't you?" One of the Deltas spoke up quietly. "Assistant Celeste, the banquet is about to begin. You should head over. Don't keep the Alpha and the others waiting. I heard some important figures from the Alpha Council came today. The Alpha specifically requested your attendance. This is a rare opportunity. You can't afford to miss this." Celeste looked down at me with contempt and snorted. "You hear that? I'm the one the Alpha values most. I'm the only one who could ever be his mate. If you know what's good for you, disappear on your own. Otherwise, next time won't be as simple as a few broken bones." Her voice dripped with menace. Her eyes glittered dangerously. "Take care of her." The Delta interrupted again. "Ma'am, the banquet is time-sensitive. You should go ahead. Today would be perfect for you to make connections with the Alpha Council elders. Perhaps the Alpha is preparing to announce you as Luna." Celeste frowned impatiently, clearly enticed by words like Alpha Council, elders, and make an impression. After a moment's consideration, she commanded, "Drag this thief to the courtyard and tie her to a tree. Let everyone see what happens to thieves." As for this dead dog, her gaze swept over Rex's body. Then she looked at her own blood-stained hands. Suddenly, her lips curved into a chilling smile. "Actually, I have a brilliant idea. I'll give the Alpha and the elders the perfect gift. Quickly, do as I say." I was roughly dragged by the Deltas through the hallway and thrown into the courtyard in front of the mansion. The blood streaming from my body left a gruesome trail across the ground. In the courtyard, several gardeners and maids were working, all unfamiliar faces. Clearly, much of the household staff had been replaced during my absence. When they saw my blood-soaked, half-dead condition, they all stopped working in shock. Assistant Celeste, what happened here?" An older maid asked tremulously, summoning her courage. Celeste strolled out casually, arms crossed with the arrogance of a conqueror. What else could it be? This new assistant the Alpha hired is a thief. She dared to steal the Alpha's treasured necklace. I caught her in the act. I'm teaching her a lesson she won't forget. I had already been tortured to the point of barely clinging to life. Hearing her accusations, I realized the stolen item she referred to must be the crystal necklace. This necklace was our mother's legacy, her family heirloom. She had told my brother to save it for me to wear when I came of age. Since I was still studying with another pack and didn't want to draw attention to myself, my brother had displayed this precious necklace in a glass case like a museum piece. Today, when I returned to the pack, he had personally placed it around my neck. Might have seen me briefly this morning, but none of them knew my true identity. Now, hearing Celeste's lies, they looked at me with contempt and disgust, mistaking me for my brother's newly hired assistant. My God, she actually stole from the Alpha. Poor Alpha works so hard. With a pack this large, he can't watch everything. We've had several assistants before who couldn't handle the job and quit. But this one is really brazen. She actually dared to steal from the Alpha's own home. Celeste did the right thing. People like this need to be taught a harsh lesson. Everyone stared at me, murmuring among themselves. An elderly gardener with white hair, wearing a straw hat and works clothes, looked at me with pity. He spoke carefully to Celeste. "Ma'am, she's so young. She probably just made a mistake in judgment. Since you recovered the item and she's learned her lesson, perhaps you could show mercy. Are you questioning my judgment?" Celeste's voice turned ice cold. "Show mercy." Celeste's voice suddenly rose, sharp and piercing. "Who do you think you are? How dare you tell me what to do? Looking to lose your job?" Several maids immediately rushed to flatter her. "Old Thompson, mind your own business. Assistant Celeste is ridding the pack of a criminal." Exactly. Ungrateful trash like this deserves harsh treatment. Otherwise, she'd think the Alpha is a pushover. Celeste basked in the flattery, glaring at me with malice before grinning wickedly. "That's right. String her up. Hang her from that tree so everyone can see." A maid named Mrs. Walker nodded eagerly. The Alpha's household has too many servants from all walks of life. Assistant Celeste, if you ask me, just tying her up isn't enough. She should be strung up as an example of what happens to thieves. This is the perfect opportunity to send a message to everyone. These maids knew that Celeste held considerable sway with my brother. She had made countless mistakes before but was never dismissed. In truth, they looked down on this former Omega. Yet their eagerness to curry favor with Celeste made me sick. Celeste looked at me with venom, sneering. "Yes, tie this bitch's hands and string her up." She had the deltas drag me from where I lay crumpled. Then they found a hemp rope, bound my hands, and hung me from a tall, leafy, ornamental tree. I swayed gently in the breeze. Bright red blood dripped from my ankles to the ground below. I no longer had the strength to even whimper. Old Thompson saw the situation spiraling out of control and feared it would go too far. He quietly slipped away to the mansion to alert my brother and the important guests. My brother, having received word, approached with two silver-haired elders. The Alpha King accompanied them. He and my brother had met on the battlefield, back when neither had inherited their positions. Without Rex, my brother never would have survived the war to claim his title. "Adrian, what's keeping you? We've been waiting over an hour. Why haven't you brought Rex to see us old friends?" One of the elders, whose surname was Morrison, called out good-naturedly. Beside him walked a distinguished middle-aged man, the current Alpha King. My brother had always had me call him Uncle Morrison. Uncle Morrison spoke warmly. Back on the battlefield, Rex sensed the enemy's trap and kept me from walking into it. Without Rex, I wouldn't be here today. Elder Morrison also sighed. More than 10 years ago, Rex used his paws to dig out over 100 survivors from the rubble. He's our old friend, our hero. The Alpha King supported his father, smiling. "Adrian, if it weren't to see Rex one more time, my father wouldn't have made this journey from the Alpha Council at his age." My brother replied, "Rex has been under the weather lately. I had my sister go tend to him. After dinner, we can all visit him." The Alpha King nodded. "Very well. If Rex weren't so devoted to you, I would have brought him to the Alpha Council long ago to live in luxury. Then he looked at my brother curiously. Adrian, instead of dining, why did you bring us out here? My brother shook his head. Just now, old Thompson told me that my assistant Celeste caught a thief. He wanted me to come see. My brother's words died in his throat. His gaze fell on me, but my brother didn't recognize me. Before my brother could speak, the Alpha King's voice thundered across the courtyard. Outrageous! What is the meaning of this? His eyes blazed with fury as he took in the horrific scene before him. How can you hang her from a tree like some common criminal? The power radiating from him made every wolf in the vicinity bow their heads in submission. Even the air seemed to thicken under his rage. My brother's face went pale as he stared at my suspended form, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. What are you doing? His voice was deadly quiet, which somehow made it more terrifying than shouting. Who gave you permission to do this? The Deltas who had been standing guard immediately began backing away, their faces draining of color. Get her down immediately, my brother roared, his composure finally shattering. Even if she stole something, you don't torture a wolf like this. This is barbaric. The Deltas stumbled over each other in their haste to approach my brother and the Alpha King. Their hands shook as they spoke. Alpha, please understand. It was Miss Celeste who ordered us to do this. One of them stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. She specifically instructed us to handle the situation this way. Yes, the other Delta added desperately. She said she knew you were kind-hearted and worried you'd be conflicted about punishing a thief. Miss Celeste said she was protecting you from a difficult decision. She took it upon herself to discipline the criminal. The first Delta nodded vigorously. Hanging her here was supposed to deter other wolves from stealing. Miss Celeste said it would send a clear message to the entire pack. My brother's expression shifted slightly, the deadly anger giving way to confusion and concern. Fine, he said, his voice still tight with barely controlled emotion. Get her down immediately, and then we'll go eat. He looked around the courtyard, his brow furrowing. Where is Celeste anyway? I specifically told her how important today was. His voice carried frustration mixed with worry. I wanted to introduce her to someone very special, besides Rex. This person means everything to me. The irony of his words hung heavy in the air, though he didn't realize it yet. Celeste even defended this person before speaking up for her when she made mistakes. One of the Deltas shook his head quickly. We don't know where Miss Celeste went. Sir, she was here supervising the punishment just minutes ago. But then she suddenly got excited about something. She said she wanted to give you a surprise. A surprise? My brother's voice was sharp with bewilderment. The Delta nodded eagerly. Yes, Alpha. She said she wanted to cook for you. She seemed very pleased about whatever she was planning. My brother looked genuinely puzzled now, his anger temporarily overshadowed by confusion. What surprise? Since when does Celeste cook? She's never shown any interest in the kitchen before. He shook his head in disbelief. I've never even seen her boil water, let alone prepare an entire meal. The Alpha King, who had been watching this exchange with growing impatience, stepped forward. Adrian, we can discuss Celeste's whereabouts later, he said firmly. Right now, this wolf needs immediate medical attention. His sharp eyes assessed my deteriorating condition. Look at her. She's barely breathing. All the wolves present turned their attention to me. The sight was gruesome. My hair hung in matted, blood-soaked strands around my face. My body swayed weakly in the wind, too broken to even struggle against the ropes. The pool of blood beneath my feet had grown larger, creating a dark stain on the pristine courtyard stones. My breathing was so shallow it was barely detectable. Among all the onlookers, only Uncle Morrison seemed to be studying me with more than casual concern. His eyes narrowed as he took in my features, or what could be seen of them beneath the blood and bruising. Something about my scent was triggering a memory, something just beyond his reach. He had encountered this particular scent before years ago, when it was much fainter and mixed with the innocence of childhood. His Alpha King abilities allowed him to sense bloodlines more clearly than most wolves, and there was something about me that connected to Adrian in ways that went beyond mere pack bonds. But I had been so young when he last saw me, and now I was so brutally injured that recognition seemed impossible. Still, the nagging familiarity wouldn't leave him alone. "By the way," my brother said suddenly, as if a thought had just occurred to him, "exactly did she steal?" His voice carried genuine curiosity now, mixed with growing suspicion. "And how did she even get inside the estate? The security here isn't a joke." He gestured toward the perimeter of the property. "Between the gamma stationed at my front door and the 12th fence with silver-lined wire at the top, that's not something an ordinary girl could just sneak through. Especially not while carrying stolen goods." His eyes narrowed as the implications began to sink in. The Delta looked confused by the question. "Alpha, isn't she your newly hired assistant? We assumed you had given her access to the property yourself." The response struck my brother like a blow. His face went white, then flushed with a mixture of anger and dawning horror. To everyone's shock, my brother shook his head firmly. "No, absolutely not." His voice was getting louder with each word. "Besides Celeste, I haven't hired an assistant in over a year. Not a single one." The silence that followed was deafening. Every wolf in the courtyard exchanged worried glances. "I hired several assistants before Celeste," my brother continued, his voice growing more agitated, "but they all quit within weeks. The work was too demanding, or they couldn't handle the pressure." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of deep frustration. "After the fourth one quit, I decided I was done with hiring. It was more trouble than it was worth." The wolves around him began to murmur among themselves, confusion and concern written on their faces. Suddenly, my brother pulled out his phone, his movements sharp and anxious. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, scrolling through his contacts. "Something's wrong here." He pressed a number and held the phone to his ear. After several rings, his expression grew increasingly troubled. "What's going on? I can't reach my sister at all." Her phone goes straight to voicemail. His voice carried a note of panic that made everyone tense. She was supposed to be resting in Rex's room, recovering from her journey back to the pack. He looked around the courtyard with growing alarm. "Thompson," he called out to the elderly gardener, "I need you to do something for me." Thompson stepped forward immediately. "Yes, Alpha. Please go to Rex's room and check on both Rex and my sister. They should be together. I'm starting to worry that something's happened to them." Thompson nodded and hurried toward the mansion without another word. As the gardener disappeared from sight, one of the Deltas approached my brother with obvious reluctance. His face was pale with fear, as he asked quietly, "Alpha, forgive me for asking, but you have a sister?" My brother turned to him with barely contained irritation. "Yes, of course I have a sister. She just returned to the pack today after years of studying elsewhere. That's exactly why I called everyone together for this gathering. Today was supposed to be the day you all finally met her." His voice grew more strained with each word. "She's been away for so long, learning from other packs, improving her skills. I wanted her to feel welcomed when she came home." The Delta's face went from pale to gray. "Sir, if she just returned today, then we wouldn't have seen her before." "Exactly," my brother snapped. "Which is why I'm asking you again. What did this wolf supposedly steal?" The Delta fell to his knees, his entire body trembling. He could no longer meet my brother's eyes. Yet it was the crystal necklace you always kept in the display case. "Alpha, the one behind the glass in your private study." The words struck my brother like lightning. His face went ashen, and for a moment he seemed to stop breathing entirely. "What?" The single word exploded from him with such force that several wolves flinched. His face had gone from pale to a sickly shade of gray. He seemed to realize something terrible, and his head snapped around to stare at me with new recognition dawning in his eyes. At that exact moment, Thompson came running back from the mansion, his face a mask of terror. He stumbled as he approached, his words coming out in a panicked rush. "Alpha! Alpha! I couldn't find the young miss or Rex anywhere." His voice was shaking so badly he could barely speak. "Rex's room there's blood everywhere, Alpha. The walls, the floor, everything is covered in blood, but there's no sign of either of them." My brother's expression became darker than a storm cloud. His gaze turned menacingly toward the deltas, and the temperature in the courtyard seemed to plummet. "What exactly have you done?" His voice was so quiet it was barely audible, but it carried more menace than any shout. The deltas began backing away, their faces showing pure terror. One of them opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His lips trembled uselessly as he tried and failed to form coherent sentences. By this time, Thompson and several of the braver maids had worked together to carefully cut me down from the tree. I collapsed onto the ground like a broken doll, my body too weak to support itself. The burning sensation from the wolf's vein was still coursing through my veins, making every breath agony. I felt like I was teetering on the edge of death, ready to fall into darkness at any moment. Everything around me seemed distant and hazy, as if I were seeing the world through thick fog. My brother rushed toward me, panic overriding all other emotions. He dropped to his knees beside me and carefully gathered my broken body into his arms. With trembling hands, he reached out and gently brushed away the blood-matted hair that was stuck to my face. Strand by strand, he cleared away the evidence of the torture I had endured. When my features were finally visible, the recognition struck him like a physical blow. His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally heartbroken anguish. "Nora," the name tore from his throat in a cry of pure agony that echoed across the entire courtyard. At that precise moment, as if summoned by some cruel twist of fate, everyone saw Celeste approaching from the direction of the mansion. She walked with confident, happy steps, completely oblivious to the tragedy that had unfolded in her absence. In her hands, she carried what looked like a carefully crafted scarf, holding it like a precious treasure. Celeste's face was bright with anticipation and pride. She had clearly spent considerable time on whatever surprise she had prepared. She approached my brother from behind, unable to see the devastation written on his face or the broken form in his arms. Looking at the assembled crowd of important wolves, her smile grew even brighter. This was her moment to shine in front of the Alpha Council elders. Like a performer about to take center stage, she spoke with eager enthusiasm. "Alpha, look at the wonderful gift I prepared for you. I made this with my own hands, just for you." She held up the scarf proudly, completely unaware of the horror that was about to unfold. I hope you like it. I put so much love and care into making it perfect." The atmosphere in the courtyard was deathly silent, as if death itself had settled over the scene. The only sounds were my labored breathing and the distant rustle of leaves in the wind. Every wolf present stood frozen, their faces expressions of shock and horror. Only now did Celeste finally notice me cradled in my brother's arms, took in the blood-soaked figure. But she still didn't understand what she was seeing. Then her gaze swept across the faces surrounding her. The ice-cold expressions on the Alpha King and the other elders' faces, the rage radiating from my brother, the horrified stares of the servants. "Why did you take her down?" Celeste's voice was sharp with indignation and confusion. She gestured wildly toward me, her face flushed with what she clearly thought was righteous anger. I specifically ordered her to be left hanging as an example to others. Her voice grew shriller as she continued. "Why do you all look so grim? Did this thief ruin your mood? Don't worry. I'll make sure she's properly punished. You don't need to concern yourselves with such a petty criminal." Celeste still didn't know what had happened. She was still wrapped in her delusions of self-importance, still believing she was the hero of this story. My brother slowly lifted his head from where he'd been staring down at my broken form. His eyes were completely bloodshot, the whites barely visible around his dilated pupils. When his gaze locked onto Celeste, she instinctively took a step backward. The fury radiating from him was so intense it was almost physical. "Get on your knees." The roar that came from my brother's throat was inhuman. More beast than man. His wolf was so close to the surface that his voice carried an alpha command that no wolf could resist. "Who are you calling a thief?" Celeste's legs gave out. Immediately she dropped to her knees, with a bone-jarring thud, her body trembling uncontrollably. But even as she knelt, her face showed confusion rather than understanding. "Alpha. It's her," she said, pointing at me with a shaking finger. "Your new assistant." Her voice was desperate, pleading for him to understand her perspective. "I was worried you'd be conflicted about punishing her properly, so I took care of it myself. I punished her first to spare you the difficulty." She looked up at him with what she clearly thought were devoted, caring eyes. "I knew you're too kind-hearted to deal with thieves harshly. I was protecting you from having to make hard decisions." My brother's laugh was cold enough to freeze one's blood. It echoed off the courtyard walls, like the sound of breaking glass. "Oh, so I should thank you then." His voice dripped with sarcasm and barely contained violence. "Is that what you're telling me? That I should be grateful for your actions?" Celeste's face brightened momentarily, thinking she was finally getting through to him. "I wouldn't dare ask for thanks, Alpha. I wouldn't dare. This is simply what a devoted assistant should do." She tried to smile through her fear, clearly believing she was showing admirable loyalty. "I live to serve you and protect your reputation. I couldn't let some common thief make you look weak or merciful." My brother was so angry that his laughter took on a hysterical edge. The sound was terrifying, like a wolf that had been pushed far beyond its breaking point. "Tell me," he said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "What exactly did Nora steal?" The way he said my name made Celeste's face go pale. There was something in his tone that finally began to penetrate her delusions. Panic flickered across her features as she fumbled in her clothing. "The necklace. The crystal necklace," she said quickly, pulling out the expensive piece of jewelry with trembling hands. She held it up toward my brother like an offering, her movements desperate and clumsy. "Alpha, this is what she stole from the glass cabinet in your private study." Her voice was getting higher and more frantic. "You always kept it on display there behind the glass." She broke in and took it. I caught her wearing it around her neck like she owned it. My brother's eyes fixed on the necklace in her hands. When he spoke, his voice was so cold it could have frozen fire. I said, "This necklace belongs to the wolf I hold most dear." His words were measured, deliberate, each one dropping like a stone into still water. Celeste's face immediately brightened. She nodded so vigorously her entire body shook. "Yes. Yes. The necklace is what you're going to give me, right?" Her voice was breathless with excitement and hope. "When I become your mate, I'll be the wolf you treasure most, won't I?" She looked up at him with shining eyes, completely convinced she had figured out his romantic gesture. "You've been saving it for me all this time. That's why you kept it in the display case, so I could see it and know what was waiting for me." The silence that followed was so complete it seemed to swallow sound itself. My brother carefully transferred my broken body to the Alpha King's arms. Uncle Morrison accepted me gently, his own hands shaking with rage as he felt how light and fragile I'd become. My brother stood up slowly like a predator preparing to strike. Then he kicked Celeste in the stomach with enough force to lift her off the ground. Celeste flew backward through the air, crashing into the courtyard stones with a sickening thud. She curled up on the ground, clutching her stomach and gasping for air. Blood trickled from this corner of her mouth as she struggled to speak. Alpha, she wheezed. I retrieved the necklace you were going to give me. Why are you hitting me? What did I do wrong? Her voice was full of genuine confusion and hurt, as if she truly couldn't understand why he was angry. My brother was so furious that his laughter turned genuinely unhinged. He pointed at her with a shaking finger, his entire body radiating murderous intent. Who are you? Who are you? He screamed. Still having such delusions? Still thinking you're something special? His voice cracked with the force of his rage. You think you can be my mate? You think you're worthy of that? He began pacing back and forth like a caged wolf. What gave you that confidence? What possibly made you think you deserved such a position? Celeste tried to speak, but he cut her off with another roar. You're just an assistant, just an Omega I picked up from the outer camps out of pity. His voice grew more venomous with each word. Have you forgotten that I was going to cast you back to the outer camp recently? Have you forgotten what you did? Celeste's face went white as old memories surfaced. For what you did back then, the stealing, the lying, the manipulation. Do you think I didn't pursue it just because I was feeling generous? My brother's laugh was bitter and cruel. It was only because my sister took pity on you and begged for mercy. She pleaded with me to give you another chance. His voice broke with emotion as he continued. My sister, who you just tortured and hung from a tree like a common criminal, was the only reason you weren't cast out in disgrace. Otherwise, do you think you'd still have the chance to abuse my authority in this pack? He leaned down to look directly into her terrified eyes. What gives you the right to compare yourself to my sister? The words, my sister, hit Celeste like a thunderbolt. Her entire body convulsed as if she'd been physically struck. She stared up at my brother's face, searching for any sign that he was lying or testing her. But his expression was deadly serious, filled with a grief and rage that couldn't be faked. Alpha, I'm sorry, she screamed, throwing herself forward to grovel at his feet. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I made a terrible mistake. Her voice was shrill with panic and desperation. I really didn't know you had a sister. You never mentioned her. You can't blame me for not knowing. She was sobbing now, her carefully maintained composure completely shattered. Please, I'm begging you, forgive me this once. I'll do anything to make it right. Anything. Celeste ignored the pain in her body, pressing her forehead to the ground and prostrating herself before my brother over and over again. Each impact of her head against the stone made a wet, sickening sound. My brother watched her performance with cold disgust, then kicked her again, sending her sprawling. She was in complete panic now, tears and snot streaming down her face in ugly rivulets. Alpha, you'll forgive me, right? You have to forgive me. She babbled through her tears. No matter what happened before, you always forgave me in the end. This time will be the same, right? She was clinging to this hope with desperate intensity. I know you're angry now, but you'll calm down and remember how much I've helped you, how loyal I've been. Celeste broke down completely, her sobs echoing across the courtyard. She continued prostrating herself until her forehead was split open and blood ran down her face. But she didn't stop, couldn't stop, driven by terror and the desperate need for forgiveness. My brother watched her pathetic display for several long moments before he spoke. When he did, his voice was filled with cruel amusement. Do you know why I chose you from all those Omegas back then? His tone was conversational now, which somehow made it more terrifying than his earlier rage. Celeste looked up hopefully, thinking he was about to explain some romantic reason. Because your eyes resembled my sister's. The words fell into the silence like stones into a deep well. From the very beginning, from the very first day I brought you here, you were nothing more than a substitute. His voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather. A poor replacement to ease the pain of missing my real family. A pale imitation of someone who actually mattered. Celeste's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally dawning horror. Don't think I don't know about all the sneaky things you've done over the years. My brother began counting off her crimes on his fingers: the embezzling from the PAC funds, the deliberate sabotage of other assistants, the lies you told to make yourself look indispensable. His voice grew colder with each accusation. I didn't blame you for lacking ability. I never expected much from an Omega anyway. Did you think I didn't know about how you drove away the previous assistants through any means necessary? Celeste's mouth opened and closed soundlessly like a fish out of water. The poisoned food, the planted evidence, the false accusations you whispered in my ear. My brother's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. I just couldn't be bothered to deal with your petty schemes. It was easier to let you play your little games. I never expected you to get worse and develop such inappropriate fantasies. His voice rose again, the control slipping. And today you treated my own sister like this. He gestured toward my broken form in Uncle Morrison's arms. You've lived too long. Just as Celeste was about to fall into complete despair, Uncle Morrison suddenly appeared beside her. His movement was so fast that she didn't see him coming until his strong hands gripped her shoulders with bruising force. "Where's Rex?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. His eyes were wild with a mixture of hope and terror. "Tell me right now, where is Rex?" Celeste was stunned by his sudden appearance and the intensity of his question. She looked up at him with genuine confusion, her tear-stained face blank with incomprehension. "Who's Rex?" she asked in terror, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know who you're talking about." Uncle Morrison's grip tightened until she cried out in pain. "The Siberian war dog," he roared, his voice carrying across the entire estate. His face was contorted with desperate rage. "The dog that was with Adrian's sister. The hero who saved my life on the battlefield. Where is he?" The blood drained from Celeste's face as understanding finally dawned. She began trembling so violently that her teeth chattered. This time she was completely consumed by despair, finally understanding the true magnitude of what she had done. The horrified expression on her face said everything that words could not. My brother froze on the spot, reading her expression and knowing what it meant. His anger could no longer be contained by his human form, not caring that he was in front of Alpha Council elders, not caring about protocol or propriety. He let his wolf surface. The transformation was partial, but terrifying. His eyes turned golden, his teeth elongated into fangs, and claws sprouted from his fingertips. The menacing presence that radiated from him made every wolf in the courtyard instinctively back away. Celeste tried to scramble backward, but there was nowhere to go. He stepped on her chest, pinning her to the ground, then began punching her again and again. Blood splattered across the courtyard stones as his claws tore through her clothes and skin. "Please," Celeste begged between impacts. "Please stop. I'm sorry." But her pleas fell on deaf ears. She should have thought about how she had treated Rex and me when she had the chance. My poor Rex. Heroic, for most of his life, only to be treated like this in his final years. Uncle Morrison also rushed forward, his own wolf barely contained. He slapped Celeste across the face with enough force to snap her head to the side. Then he grabbed her hair and yanked her head up to look at him. "You..." He roared directly into her face. "Do you know how many honors Rex had?" Spittle flew from his mouth as he spoke, his rage making him almost incoherent. "Do you know what great contributions he made to the pack, to the entire werewolf world?" He shook her like a ragged doll. "How many wolves did his warnings save on the battlefield? How many lives did he preserve with his sacrifice?" Uncle Morrison's eyes were completely red now, bloodshot with grief and fury. "How dare you treat him like that? How dare you lay your filthy hands on a hero?" His voice cracked with emotion. "How dare you beat him to death?" Rex had once dug Morrison out from a pile of dead wolves in the war zone, pulling him from certain death when he was too injured to save himself. From that day forward, Uncle Morrison had considered Rex his savior, someone whose debt could never be repaid. "Tell me where Rex's body is," Uncle Morrison roared, shaking Celeste so hard her teeth rattled. "I need to give him a proper burial. He deserves honor, not whatever you've done to him." Celeste's eyes darted instinctively toward the scarf that had fallen to the ground during the chaos. The movement was barely perceptible, but Uncle Morrison caught it. His gaze followed hers to the innocent-looking piece of fabric lying in the dirt. What he began, his voice trailing off as horrible understanding began to dawn. Celeste saw that he had noticed her glance and knew she was trapped. Her voice came out as barely a whisper, choked with horror at her own actions. I skinned him and made him into a scarf." Uncle Morrison staggered toward the fallen scarf like a man walking to his own execution. His legs barely supported his weight as the horrible truth sank in. When he knelt down and picked up the scarf with trembling hands, I could see his entire body shaking. The fabric was soft and well made, crafted with obvious care and skill. But knowing what it was made from turned it into something monstrous. Uncle Morrison held it close to his face, and I saw tears streaming down his cheeks as he recognized the familiar scent. "Rex," he whispered, his voice breaking completely. The veins on my brother's forehead bulged so prominently they looked ready to burst. His face had turned a dangerous shade of purple with rage. "You're truly a monster," he roared at Celeste, spittle flying from his mouth. "A creature without a soul, without any shred of decency." His voice cracked with the intensity of his emotion. "Not only did you beat my sister half to death, you killed Rex." He pointed a shaking finger at the cowering Omega. "You murdered a war hero, a legend. And then he couldn't even finish the sentence to overcome with revulsion. You're all going to die. Every single one of you, the 3 deltas nearby, seeing how disastrously things had turned out, began scrambling over each other in their desperation to beg for mercy. They fell to their knees in a pathetic heap. Their earlier arrogance completely evaporated. "Alpha, please listen to us," the first Delta cried, his voice high with panic. "This has absolutely nothing to do with. We were just following orders. We're innocent." The second one chimed in desperately. "We were just doing what we were told. We had no choice." The third Delta, the one who had wielded the hot iron, was practically sobbing. "Please spare us, Alpha. It was all this bitch's idea." He pointed accusingly at Celeste. "It was her. She planned everything. She did everything." Now the 3 of them turned on each other like rabid dogs, each trying to save his own skin. "She's the one who burned the young miss with the hot iron," the first Delta shouted. "I just held her down because she ordered me to, and she forced the young miss to drink wolfsbane." The second added quickly, "We told her it was too much, but she wouldn't listen." The third Delta nodded frantically. "Rex was beaten to death by her with a wooden stick. We tried to stop her, but she threatened to have us executed if we interfered." They were all lying, of course, trying desperately to distance themselves from their crimes. Each one painted himself as an unwilling participant, forced into terrible acts by Celeste's commands. But they were all deluding themselves if they thought this would save them. When my brother and Uncle Morrison heard these detailed confessions, hearing exactly how I had been burned with hot iron, forced to drink wolfsbane, and how Rex had been beaten to death, this only caused even more blazing fury to erupt from both of them. The Alpha King's face had gone completely white with rage. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. Elder Morrison looked like he might collapse from the shock and horror. They didn't understand what Rex truly meant to our family, to our entire world. He wasn't just a dog, wasn't just a pet or companion. He was more like family to us, a brother who had shared our joys and sorrows. After accompanying my brother to war and saving countless lives, he had become the pack's greatest hero. a living legend that even the Alpha Council wanted to claim as their own. The idea that such a noble creature had been murdered and desecrated was beyond comprehension. My brother walked silently toward the 3 cowering deltas. His movements were slow and deliberate, like a predator stalking its prey. The deltas tried to scramble backward, but there was nowhere to run. Without a word, my brother reached the first delta and grabbed his arm. The sound of bones snapping was sickeningly loud in the courtyard silence. The delta's scream of agony echoed off the mansion walls. My brother moved to the second delta, methodically, breaking both his arms with clinical precision. Then he shattered the third delta's legs, leaving all 3 of them writhing on the ground. But he wasn't finished. He picked up a thick wooden branch that had fallen from one of the ornamental trees. One by one, he drove the makeshift stake through each delta's shoulder, pinning them to the earth like insects in a collection. Their screams of agony echoed throughout the entire estate, carrying across the grounds and into the surrounding forest. "Take them away," Elder Morrison commanded, his voice shaking with exhaustion and grief. He waved his hand toward the Gammas, who had been standing at attention nearby. "Get these things out of my sight before I do something we'll all regret." The Gammas moved quickly, roughly dragging Celeste and the 3 broken deltas away from the courtyard. Celeste was barely conscious, her body battered and her spirit completely shattered. As they dragged her past me, I saw her lips moving soundlessly. I think she was trying to apologize, but it was far too late for that. Then my brother walked slowly up to Uncle Morrison, who was still holding the scarf made from Rex's fur. Though my brother said nothing, just stood quietly looking at the horrible gift in Morrison's hands. I could feel the depth of his pain radiating from him like heat from a forge. The guilt of failing to protect his old comrade, the rage at Celeste's torture that had left me broken and barely alive, the grief of losing the last connection to his war days. All of it combined into an agony that seemed to tear him apart from the inside out. I was carefully lifted and taken to the PAC's medical facility. My brother personally carried me there, refusing to let anyone else touch me. He ordered the healers to save me at any cost, threatening dire consequences if they failed. Because I had consumed too much wolfbane for too long. My body was shutting down. Healers worked frantically through the night, pumping my stomach, forcing healing potions down my throat, using every technique they knew. I was in emergency care for over 12 hours before finally being declared out of immediate danger. My brother remained by the emergency room door all night without moving. He didn't eat, didn't drink, didn't even sit down. After losing Rex, I had become his last remaining family in this world. Several PAC members tried to convince him to rest, but he refused to leave his post. Only after hearing from the head healer that I was finally stable did he allow himself to breathe a sigh of relief. But even then, he didn't go far. For the next several days, my brother made no public appearances. The PAC's business was handled by his beta, while he dealt with his grief in private. My brother's driver, an elderly wolf named Stevens, later told me what Adrian had been doing during those missing days. He had searched dozens of locations throughout the territory, personally examining potential burial sites for Rex. Nothing was good enough at first. Too close to roads, too exposed to weather, not scenic enough for such a hero. Finally, he found a beautiful mountain cemetery overlooking a valley where Rex used to play as a young dog. It was perfect, peaceful, protected with a view of the sunrise every morning. On the day of Rex's burial, despite my physical weakness and the healer's protests, I insisted on attending. Stevens pushed my wheelchair carefully along the mountain path, taking extra care not to jostle my still healing injuries. When we arrived at the cemetery, I was amazed by what I saw. There were so many wolves gathered there, far more than I had expected. All their faces bore expressions of deep sorrow as they stood in perfect formation, like soldiers honoring a fallen comrade. Stevens leaned down to whisper in my ear. They all rushed here from the Alpha Council headquarters. Miss, some of them traveled for days just to see Rex off on his final journey. He saved that many lives during the war. The Alpha King stood at the very front of the gathering, his usually commanding presence subdued by grief. Several other high-ranking elders flanked him, all wearing formal mourning attire. I could see the pain in Uncle Morrison's eyes from across the crowd. He must have been heartbroken beyond words. Stevens continued his quiet commentary. Your brother told me that on the battlefield, the Alpha King and Rex developed an unbreakable bond, especially after Rex saved his life in that ambush. Their relationship became legendary among the troops. After the war ended, the Alpha King was so reluctant to let Rex return home that he offered to build him a palace at the Alpha Council headquarters. Uncle Morrison and my brother approached Rex's grave together. They knelt in the soft earth before the polished stone marker, then pressed their foreheads to the ground in the traditional gesture of deepest respect. They remained in that position for several long minutes, each lost in their own memories and grief. I didn't fully understand the extent of Rex's achievements until I saw this massive gathering. But in my heart, I had always considered Rex family, and that was enough. With my brother's permission, I had Stevens wheel me closer to the grave. I placed Rex's favorite treats, the special jerky he loved, and the squeaky toy he'd played with since puppyhood before his headstone. I'm sorry, old friend, my brother said, his voice from days of crying. I failed to protect you when you needed me most. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of absolute devastation. Only then did I notice how much the grief had aged him. Since Rex's death, his hair had turned significantly whiter, especially at the temples. New lines had appeared around his eyes, and his shoulders seemed permanently bowed with sorrow. Brother, I asked quietly during one of his visits to my recovery room, what happened to Celeste? The question seemed to startle him out of his brooding. He looked at me for a long moment, then turned away without answering. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken pain. But for a long time afterward, no matter how carefully I tried to find out, I couldn't discover any news about Celeste's fate. It was as if she had simply vanished from existence. The few pack members who might have known refused to discuss it, changing the subject whenever I brought it, until several months later when I was finally strong enough to visit the Alpha Council headquarters with my brother. I was chatting with Maya, a young wolf who worked in the council's administrative offices, when she mentioned something that caught my attention. Did you hear about that tribunal they held a few months ago? She asked casually. What tribunal? I pressed, trying to keep my voice neutral. Maya lowered her voice conspiratorially. The Alpha Council was absolutely furious about something. They convened an emergency tribunal to judge some Omega who had committed terrible crimes. My heart began racing, but I forced myself to remain calm. What kind of crimes? I asked. I don't know all the details, Maya admitted, but it must have been something horrible. They brought in judges from 7 different packs. I'd never seen them so angry. Only then did I learn that Celeste had been taken to the Alpha Council for formal trial. What happened to her? I pressed, needing to know the end of the story. Maya's expression grew serious. From what I heard, it was completely unanimous. Not a single dissenting voice. They all agreed to sentence her to execution by fire. She shuddered slightly. They say she broke down completely during the trial, kept begging for mercy, claiming she didn't understand the significance of what she'd done. But when they told her about Rex's war record, about all the lives he'd saved, Maya trailed off, shaking her head. She reportedly screamed for hours before they carried out the sentence. I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness at this news. I wasn't surprised by the outcome at all. That's exactly what she deserved for her crimes. But I couldn't help thinking about how different things might have been if she had simply chosen to be grateful for the opportunity my brother had given her. Every month after that, my brother and I made the journey to Rex's mountain grave. We would bring fresh flowers, clean the headstone, and spend quiet hours remembering our beloved companion. These visits seemed to help my brother heal, though the grief never completely left his eyes until 6 months later, when I decided to try something that might help him move forward. I had spent weeks searching through different litters, looking for just the right puppy. When I finally found him, a small Siberian mix with Rex's distinctive markings and intelligent eyes, I knew he was the one. On the anniversary of Rex's death, I brought the puppy to my brother's office. The little dog bounded into the room with Rex's same enthusiastic energy, immediately going to my brother and placing his tiny paws on his knee. When my brother looked down at the puppy, I saw something I hadn't seen in months. Tears streamed down his face, but for the first time, they weren't tears of pure grief. "Rex," he whispered, gently, picking up the puppy and holding him close. "See you in next time."